Susan Suntree and Phoebe. And today, everyone, thank you for joining us. First of all, this is our 30th Poetry Hour. We had scheduled two superb poets to read their poetry today, Susan Suntree and Iris Berry, but Iris had to work. So what we'll do, we'll proceed with the program as usual. I'll introduce Susan, she'll read, and then when she finishes, I'll read some poetry by Gary Snyder, who's an important poet, and it might fit in with Susan's subject matter. Susan Suntree's book-length nonfiction poem, Sacred Sites, The Secret History of Southern California, University Nebraska Press, won the Southern California Independent Booksellers Association Award for Nonfiction, the Penn Oakland Josephine Miles Award for Poetic Narrative, and a Mellon Foundation Elemental Arts Award. Suntree's books and chapbooks include Eye of the Womb, Power Press, also published in Madrid as a bilingual edition, Rita Moreno, Chelsea House, Wisdom of the East, Stories of Compassion, Inspiration, and Love, Contemporary / McGraw-Hill, for which the Dalai Lama wrote the foreword. Her work has appeared in journals and anthologies, and she has published essays and book chapters about activist theater. Poetry Flash and Theater Journal have published her reviews. Susan's poetry has depth, precision, erudition, and numinosity. Here's a superlative poet, Susan Suntree.
Thank you, Harry. Wow. All right, well, it is a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Jennifer, for producing this wonderful media event, and Harry, Master of Poetic Ceremonies, for introducing it and inviting me to read. I am honored, and it's always a pleasure to share this work. As Harry said about Sacred Sites, it's an award-winning book. I'm going to read from two collections today. One, Sacred Sites, which tells the story of the origins of the Southern California landscape from the points of view of Western science and indigenous myths and songs. And it answers that ancient question, the one we always ask, how did things come to be the way they are? And that is a question that is across the epochs. People ask that question. My publisher, University of Nebraska Press, reissued it this year in an updated paperback edition, from which I'm going to be reading. And later this year, I will be releasing it as audio theater. Peter Coyote is part of, in addition to myself, Peter Coyote has read Gary Snyder's foreword as well as the introduction, and the marvelous actor Kalani Kwepo, who is of Native American origins, stars in Jamestown, and is active at the Autry's Native Voices, also reads. So there's music and so forth. We're very excited, and if you'd like to know more about it and maybe join our team of supporters, please go to my website at susansuntree.com, and you can learn all about this upcoming event. I'm also going to read from a forthcoming book titled Dear Traveler. I'll read a couple of poems from that collection. But I'm going to begin with Sacred Sites. I'm going to begin reading from the first chapter, which is Western Science, and then I'll read from the second chapter, which is Native American Myths and Songs. In the beginning, unutterable, hot, no space, no time, not shape, not size, not taste, not smell, not see, not touch, a singular nothing, Nothing at all. Compressed to a point, infinitely dense. Wobbling. 14 billion years ago. Colossal balloon, the Big Bang, seething radiation, no center, no edge, roiling, gaseous universe soup. Pure energy pops riotous sparks, or the spectral harmonics of minute energy strings. Wild, infinitesimal bits, the 6 quarks, up, down, strange, charmed, truth, beauty. The 3 leptons, electron, muon, tauon, and the little neutral ones, neutrinos, whirl in and out of colliding light, particle annihilating antiparticle, blasting photons at every turn. The first frenzied pips radiate forever into unfathomable mystery. What caused it? Came before it? Into what belly, what field did it blast? Energy to mass, mass to energy, plasma pounding to particle and back to wave, gravity overcome by the speeding inflation and walloping heat. The Big Bang births space as it expands, time as it travels, doubling its size in seconds. Shock waves throb through the plasma, ringing the cosmos like a temple bell. Temperature falling, the hot whirling slightly cools. 3 quarks cling to each other and settle as protons. 3 quarks cling to each other and settle as neutrons. Electrons settle. Forms ripen in nothing's singular field. The same proton, neutron, electron throughout space and time. Star, tongue, tear, plastic fork. Our bodies as old as the cosmos. This was one of the most important lessons that I learned from all the research that I did. And it has stayed with me and informs the entire book and really has informed my life when I realized that all the visible matter in the universe, and that is only 5% of the matter of the universe, FYI, all the rest is dark. But this 5% of visible matter that we study and we study and we study is made up of only one thing, the eternal proton, the one eternal thing. And it's all this form is created as I describe. I basically lay it out as recipes in the book because it's like that. One proton collides with another proton, deuterium, and then they collide with another proton, and you've got and then the procession of material matter that we call life and what we see and what we measure. But it's all one proton. So in fact, we really are all connected. We really are all one. All of it. One thing. To me, that is astounding to contemplate. Okay, so I'm now going to read, I'm reading some of the things that I just love, and this is the origins of water. Now we know that our bodies are, 96, 98% water. This is the watery planet. It's the essence of life on this planet. And this is how it came about. 10 billion years ago, the young planet settles. Contracting, it cools. As the surface cools into crust, molten rocks dry and harden, releasing water trapped in their mineral webs. Asteroids smash into the crust, delivering their water. Volcanoes explode magma into ash, minerals, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, water vapor. The primeval atmosphere weaves water into clouds. The great rains begin. Extravagant rains stream into oceans, oceans of rain. This watery rock we name Earth, the blue planet, right here. Rivers of rain pour over rocks carrying their mineral salts into the oceans. Sunshine evaporates ocean water into clouds, leaving the salts behind. As the world's water cycles in and out of clouds, the oceans slowly grow salty. In my research, another point where I was thrilled to learn about the origin of the summer buzz and fruitful glory in my garden, but the worldwide decline in insects and songbirds is also sadly evident in my garden now. And this reminded me of something I read long ago in the Finnish epic poem, the Kalevala. And in the Kalevala, it describes a traditional and very common shamanic practice, which is, in order to heal something, you first recite the origins. For example, in the Kalevala, a man is cut by a knife. So the healer in the great song begins by singing the origins of blood and then singing the origins of the knife blade. So, with the interest of healing my garden and the great garden of the world, I will recite the origins of flowers and their profound bond with insects. "100 million years ago. For 30 million years, plants shed fertilizing pollen into the wind or coat the legs of visiting insects come to drink the plant's sweet, nutritious nectar, who carry the golden treasure to the next plant. They carve a pact into the core of their lives. Plant plus insect equals life. Then, one day, somewhere in the world's green expanse, in field or tropical forest, by mutation or mystery, the first tiny petals, not green, now red, yellow, blue, pink, a glorious insect landing pad, and the first bees, butterflies, wasps, and coming soon, the birds. Mammals chasing insects discover fruits, nuts, seeds. Dinosaurs chomp leaves, flowers, and their seed-filled fruits as they lumber along, digesting poop seeds along the way. The green continents, now florid, North America, dazzling, buzzing. In this selection from Book 2, Myths and Songs, I'm going to begin with an origin myth that was recited in 1908 to a novelist and anthropologist by practice, a woman named Constance Goddard du Bois. The man's name was, in Spanish, Lucario Cuevas. He was a chief or captain of his tribe, but every one of his people had died in the genocide. The California genocide was profound. And he was close to death. And it was only for that reason, that there was no one left, and that he trusted Constance Goddard du Bois, that he gave her his song. This is considered, in fact, he died the next day. This is considered the oldest recorded origin myth of Southern California. I'll note that I include many origin myths because in Southern California, there isn't one holy text. There is a fundamental worldview and some primeval characters, and they show up in different guises, but you can recognize the similarity in their names as I recount in the book these various myths. But I'm going to do the opening section from this myth. Oh, and note the caution that comes shortly. It is the caution. He stops and he cautions Constance Scudder du Bois, and he said, because he starts off with the metaphor, of course, of male and female, classic of creation myths. But he stops and said, these white people who take everything at face value, he said, it's not male and female, FYI. It's of another nature. Just like, so she gets it. So that caution that I include in the book, which I found in her notes, is his. First, there is quiet, only solitude, like an empty house, no house, only kavish, aktafish, kavish, empty, aktafish, vacant. These two are man and woman, brother and sister. Then, kavish, aktafish, become omai, yamai. Omai, not alive. Yamai, not in existence. When these two discover themselves, they talk with one another. Brother, who are you? Sister, who are you? Desire stirs the man, so he never again calls her sister. She asks again, who are you? He says, kavish, 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 I am empty, empty, empty. He blows out his spirit breath. She answers, aktakvish, aktakvish, aktakvish. I am vacant, vacant, vacant. She blows out her spirit breath. She asks again, who are you? He answers, oh my, oh my, oh my. I am not alive, not alive, not alive. He blows out his spirit breath. He asks again, who are you? She answers, Yamai, Yamai, Yamai. I am not in existence, not in existence, not in existence. She blows out her spirit breath. Not alive, not in existence, becomes Wayakut, Huikut, Hararai, Shatutai. Wayakut, Huikut, pale gray, the Milky Way. Hararai, Shatutai, changing, descending deep into the heart. These two become Tukmit, dark sky, Tamayawut, earth. Clearly it is not male and female, sky and earth, but of another nature. These two, Tukmit, Tamayawut, dark sky, earth, come forth from what came before, not as children, but as themselves, a continuing being. It is very dark, without stars, sun, moon. The woman lies with her feet to the north. The man sits by her right side. In the darkness, They talk with one another again, and what they name, they become the first world. Tamayawood, of course, gives birth to everything, every visible and invisible thing in this world. Weather, the sun, everything. Trees, rocks, the land, water, everything. And these are known as the first people. And they are powerful, intelligent, emotional. Now all things are ready. Tamayawood lies outstretched, her feet to the north, her head to the south, her left hand to the west, her right hand to the east. The first world, once noisy and disturbed, is calm and quiet. The first people, everything we see, stars, stones, wind and waters, the furred, finned and feathered, bushes and trees, are the ancestors of the new people, the human beings. The first people live for a very long time. They live very well. Their great leader, Wieot, is poisoned by Wahawat, the red-legged frog, in one of the stories. There's various stories about how this character comes to die. And when Wieot dies, death enters the world, and even the first people have to die. It's a great tragedy and changes everything, but they continue to live well for a very long time. Then come the great floods, and Southern California has several flood myths, and I've recorded several of them in the book. And what happens with the floods is that ends the era of the first people, and then come the human beings. So the first people are our ancestors. That's why the ground is holy. It's the body of the first people from which we come. So here's one version of the origins of human beings. Just as the first people migrated throughout the world, the new people, the human beings, traveled too, seeking their homelands. Wherever they settled, they told stories and sang songs about their ancestors and where they came from. Along the coast, around San Juan Capistrano and north, they say human beings were made this way. After Wieot's ashes and bones were ground and buried, the first people gathered in a council at Pavungna, the village in Long Beach where some say Wieot died. They were talking about how to solve the problem of gathering food and eating it. White clay no longer nourished them, and they were tired of it. While they talked, some human beings wandered in, sat down at the council, and asked what they were discussing. Children of Tamayawood, the humans had been wandering the earth for a very long time until they made their way to Pavungna and found the first people. They told the council they had the power to create food. The human beings gave new powers to the first people. Some would cause rain and weather. Some would cause grains, greens, and roots to grow. Others would cause the animals to flourish. They would do these things by singing new songs taught to them by the human beings. As they sang their powerful songs, the first people turned into the new world, transformed into everything they dreamed of eating. This is the world where the human beings live and what they eat. Among all the people, the human beings are the ones who have the power, through their songs, to affect the balance of the world. Through all the stories and songs, over and over is repeated the basic premise about human beings, about our role in the world. It is acknowledged that we are amongst the most powerful of the people. And therefore, what we do is extremely affecting to the whole world. If we go out of balance, the world goes out of balance. So we have two tasks, which is repeated over and over. One is to renew the world. That is to garden it, maintain it, care for it, not for ourselves alone, because we don't exist alone, but for all beings. The well-being of all is our well-being. So to renew the world. And the other is to maintain the balance. And if we don't, of course, there's hell to pay. And one of the concluding stories here, one of the longest and most important myths in the book, it's very much a Greek tragedy, is about a doctor and captain, that is a shamanic chief, who goes way out of balance, and there is only horror and destruction that follows. So that's our task: renew the world, stay in balance. I'm going to read the final, the postscript to Sacred Sites. And it's how the book ends. 2020. One night, Raven and Coyote are sitting in the mountains beside the Hollywood sign, looking over the city. "Look at all those lights," says Raven, cocking one eye and then the other as he studies the sight. "They just keep spreading. It's like a wildfire down there." Coyote gets real excited by all the twinkling, and he says to Raven, "Don't you know what they're doing? They're wiring the stars to the ground. They're trying to make heaven on earth." He laughs because he thinks he's funny, and anyway, it's night, and he likes the heat. Raven sighs. Well, if they'd leave a few of those stars in the sky, they could see that it already is. Thank you. Such a pleasure to share those stories with you.
Thank you, Susan.
I'm going to read just a couple of poems from my forthcoming book, Dear Traveler. It's note that every poem is addressed to the traveler. Traveler. Sun breaks the day's heart, its daily departures. Glorious robes tossed into darkness, fleeing naked over the edge of the sea. Only the star canopy remains, votives lighted so long ago, summoning the dawn, awakening love's beloved body. Traveler, you are the song of your own making, without knowing the notes. Music rises without tongue. No strings, no reeds. The sound begins as a chorus. Desert winds circle brush and spare stalks of grass. How the dry sticks sing is what the wind wants to know. How do you hear when even your ears are singing? And I'll conclude with this poem inspired by the fires. Traveler, after the sweltering summer, after ash sifting down from the burial grounds, open the gate. Then tell me, what did the fire say? Wall, why my wind-marched fortress, air ripped from every lung, rapturous rocketing light, writhing forests, no longer trees, heralds. Tongue, Hot prods plunge down water-worn ravines, fire lips smacking, powered to eat everything. Roar, terrifying trees until they split, sap fed to the fire. Ash, pooled pink coat hanger. Doe's head trapped in a plastic bucket. She can't shake it loose. She stumbles. Ashes, ashes, fire collapses. What did the bird say? We did not say blue sky, your sky. We did not say gray or black, your sky. We did not say mottled clouds, your sky. We did not say flame. We did not say shame. What did the plants say? Fire burst scorched seeds onto the prepared ground, resting, waiting for rain to root and breathe. We need you to breathe out. We need you to breathe in. You need us to breathe out. You need us to breathe in. We're breathing. But you are blue and slumped. You've sent in the flames yet again. You've taken the breathing animals with you. What did the animals say? Animals beneath a rock, animals under the planters, animal cities in your visceral caverns. What you can't see, you don't name. What you don't name, you can't see. And when you do, you stamp us possessed. But take your time. Shoot yourselves to far outer space. Let the stars chew on you, those celestial bovine burners. What did the horses say? Tread trammeled the pasture, heat soured the grass, the bit tasted like bullets. We fled and found refuge with outriders. What did the dolphins say? We see through the dirt to the base of your spine, your haven of fists, the hull of your mind. When you don't sing to us, salt water reaches up and up to capture your eyes, rebirth your hearts. There were seasons when you danced with us, when we shared with you our visions seen in depths where you are blind. How the earth loves. We loved you. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you for excavating those origin myths and showing us once again how important balance and harmony are in our lives and how we are all interconnected. I mean, it's such a pleasure to be reminded that, especially in this time. So thank you very much for your wonderful, precise and eloquent and erudite reading. Thank you, Susan.
Oh, it was my pleasure, Harry. Just a pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Our pleasure. I think Gary Snyder would also approve of Susan's work. He was born in 1930, and he's one of America's greatest poets. He would be my choice, but Joy Harjo is certainly a great choice, but Snyder has always been my choice for a poet laureate. He has such a long-range consciousness. As a young man, he worked in the Western Mountain Country as a logger and forest ranger. And as a young poet, I always loved I still love buying these chapbooks. And this one here is one of my favorites, Rip Rap and Cold Mountain Poems by Origin Press, to get back to the origin, which Susan has taken us on a journey to. So I will read some of his poems from that. This book was published in the 50s. Mid-August at Sourdough Mountain Lookout. Down valley, a smoke haze, 3 days heat after 5 days rain. Pitch glows on the fir cones, across rocks and meadows, swarms of new flies. I cannot remember things I once read. A few friends, but they are in cities, drinking cold snow water from a tin cup, looking down for miles through high, still air. The late snow and lumber strike of the summer of '54. Whole town shut down, hitching the coast road, only jippos running their beat trucks, no logs on, gave me rides. Loggers all gone fishing, chainsaws in a pool of cold oil on back porches of 10,000 split shake houses, quiet in summer rain. Hitched north all of Washington, crossing and recrossing the passes, blown like dust, no place to work. Climbing the steep ridge below Shuckson, clumps of pine float out the fog, no place to think or walk or work. Drifting on Mount Baker alone in a gully of blazing snow, cities down the long valleys west, thinking of work, but here, burning in sun glare below a wet cliff, above a frozen lake, the whole Northwest on strike, black burners cold, the green chain still. I must turn and go back, caught on a snow peak between heaven and earth, and stand in lines in Seattle, looking for work. Milton by Firelight. John Milton, Paradise Lost. As a matter of fact, the last word in Paradise Lost, to get back to Susan's great work, is uttered by Eve, and it is restore. So that's, we need to keep trying to restore. And also another little quote that I always love is by John Muir, and he said, there's a need to seek balance. So thanks for poetry. It does give us unity and harmony and a sense of origin and a sense of, just that deep spiritual connection. Milton by Firelight, Paiute Creek, August 1955. Quote, oh hell, what do mine eyes with grief behold, end of quote. Working with an old single jack miner who can sense the vein and cleavage in the very guts of rock, can blast granite, build switchbacks that last for years under the heat of snow, thaw mule hooves. What use, Milton? A silly story of our lost general parents, eaters of fruit. The Indian, the chainsaw boy, and a string of 6 mules came riding down to camp, hungry for tomatoes and green apples, sleeping in saddle blankets under a bright night sky, Pond River slantwise by morning, Jay's squall coffee boils. In 10,000 years, the Sierras will be dry and dead, home of the scorpion, ice-scratched slabs and bent trees. No paradise, no fall, only the weathering land, the wheeling sky, man with his Satan scouring the chaos of the mind. Oh, hell, fire down, too dark to read miles from a road. The bell mare clangs in the meadow, that packed dirt for a fill-in, scrambling through loose rocks on an old trail, all of a summer's day. 16, page 16, I should have said water is the title of the poem. Water. Pressure of sun on the rock side whirled me in dizzy hop and step descent. Pool of pebbles buzzed in a juniper shadow, tiny tongue of a this year rattlesnake flick. I leaped, laughing for little boulder color coil. pounded by heat, raced down the slabs to the creek, deep, tumbling under arching walls, and stuck whole head and shoulders in the water, stretched full on cobble, ears roaring, eyes open, aching from the cold, and faced a trout. This is one of my two favorite poems by Gary Snyder, Hay for the Horses. Hay for the horses. He had driven half the night from far down San Joaquin through Mariposa, up the dangerous mountain roads, and pulled in at 8 a.m. with his big truckload of hay behind the barn. With winch and ropes and hooks, we stacked the bales up clean to splintery redwood rafters high in the dark flecks of alfalfa, whirling through single cracks of light, itch of hay dust in the sweaty shirt and shoes. At lunchtime, under black oak, out in the hot corral, the old mare nosing lunch pails, grasshoppers crackling in the weeds. I'm 68, he said. I first bucked hay when I was 17. I thought that day I started, I sure would hate to do this all my life. And damn it, that's just what I've gone and done. We never know our fate, do we?
No, we sure don't.
And Rip Rap, the title poem, this is also one of my two favorite poems. This is like a treatise on writing poetry. And one thing I noticed in Susan's poetry, how precise everything was. And also she gave the poem time to breathe. And she mentioned that too, breathing is important. I mean, obviously in this time we're going through, that's then and always is the main thing, to breathe. So here is Rip Rap by Gary Snyder. Lay down those words. Lay down these words before your mind like rocks, placed solid by hands, in choice of place, set before the body of the mind, in space and time, solidity of bark, leaf, or wall, rip-rap of things, cobble of Milky Way, straying planets, these poems, people, lost ponies with dragging saddles and rocky, sure-foot trails. The world's like an endless, four-dimensional game of go. Ants and pebbles in the thin loam, each rock a word, a creek-washed stone, granite ingrained with torment of fire and weight, crystal and sediment, linked hot, all change in thoughts as well as things. And he leaves that poem, as well as things, which evokes one of the most important phrases in modern American poetry, no ideas but in things, by William Carlos Williams, which we all know very well. We have about 10 or 15 minutes left. Let's just talk to you, Susan, a little bit about your journey. When did you first write your first poem? And secondly, what is it about poetry that attracted you to the form?
I wrote my first poetry in elementary school. I mean, because that's what we did. We had a little magazine. This was at Longley Way Elementary School in Arcadia, California. I mean, after I'd finished going to Catholic school. In Catholic school, I was allowed to create plays. So theater and poetry, performance and poetry, have been the two poles of my life for really my whole life. And then I really loved writing poetry when I was in elementary school. And then, but I remember the feeling of that joy, as it was as joyous as creating the plays. And so when I was in college, I published a poem in some kind of college anthology. My major moved all over the map, but finally I graduated in English, so I could graduate and went to graduate school and continued to write poetry on the side and act in plays. And I had an experience, though, that changed my whole orientation to both theater and poetry when I was at the University of Arizona trying to find my path, because it was all so interesting. So I was a nursing student and an art minor, and I had been cast in one of the plays. And I was writing poetry. I mean, I don't know what to do with myself. So I had been attending, this was a very advanced nursing program run by what I now know were lesbian Appalachian nurses who kind of despised doctors. And they had devised a very advanced program at the University of Arizona where we were going to become what we would now call nurse practitioners. And so we were given a lot of responsibility. It was really demanded of us. So I was right away at births and deaths and tending abused children. It was shocking. I mean, I was just a kid from the middle class from the Antelope Valley, for God's sake, at that point. And of course, it changed me enormously. Life and death, there it was. And I had to tend to it. I was helping care. I was attempting to ameliorate that suffering as barely a child myself, very young woman. And so there I was in the theater department in the basement while waiting for my little, I had a speaking part, but it was small. And people were, gabbing around in the way people do in theater and singing musical theater. And I had just come from such an extraordinary experience of being with someone unprepared to give birth, who gave birth, and it was pretty tough. And I just thought, there has to be more to theater and poetry than this, than just entertainment. And that turned me to study the ritual origins of art. And I did that for a long time. And I looked to the origins to see what at the beginning was poetry and theater really doing. What was its role? And of course, you look at the great epics, its role is to be the song of the most foundational beliefs or our most foundational understandings of the nature of reality. And that's what the theater embodied. That's what it did, and that's what poetry did in the great epics. They're always private, entertainments and personal songs, and that's all wonderful. But the backbone of these art forms, which I feel are intimately connected, and you must feel that way too, Harry, are the same. They are to sing and contain in the songs our foundational understanding of the nature of reality, and to connect us to the great round of the cycle of life, of the seasons, the nature of the earth. What is it? And we explore that and express it in our poetry. Poetry can do so much work that I blame it on the CIA, what the hell, art for art's sake, just don't talk about society, just don't participate, stay in your little silo, and let's talk about form and not about content. Well, forget about that. I mean, that's not what poetry has done. That's not been its job. Its job has been the great job, the great work of holding us in a vision of our connectedness. And so that changed me. I went away from that experience and never was the same again about art, about creative expression, and pursued that from that point forward.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I always feel that the greatest poets, the greatest writers were the Greek dramatists and the epic poets in the beginning. And then I also just wanted to ask you a question about, I noticed in your biography, you have written about activist theater. Now, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. Were you writing about, or were you interested at all in the living theater? Julian Beck and Judith Malina, they did plays like A Man's a Man by Bertolt Brecht, where you break down a person and build them back up, or The Connection, where they had the actors out in the lobby, being junkies, before the show even started in intermission, and they did the Brig by Kenneth Brown. Were you interested in them? I mean, I know there have been a lot more multicultural and multi-ethnic and multi-gender activist theater playwrights since then, but what are a couple of your themes that you wrote about when you wrote about activist theater?
Well, when I wasn't in New York, although it was my great dream to go there, but I didn't make it. And, I've just got heavy shoes on the West Coast. Even though I did my graduate work in England, I was so poor, I had to come home even before I was finished. And I wrote my thesis about a contemporary theater, and that's another story, but it was part of this. And I read about them. I read about them all. And my great inspiration, actually, was Jean-Claude Van Attali and the Open Theater, and their great production, The Serpent, which just blew me away. I never saw it in New York, but I saw a performance of it on the West Coast, and I read all about it. And that, I thought, now that's a form that breaks totally into the present and uses the fabric of the present, and yet links it with the great insights, with the great themes about the nature of reality. And I thought, now that reach, that's the reach I want. And so when I was in Northern California, so I wrote about, what I've written about have been performances that I've been a part of. I was involved in feminist theater when I moved to the Bay Area, and I was in one of the first women's theater productions in the Bay Area, and was just keen about it, and published a couple of essays about women's theater in a couple of books, edited by Gail Kimball, who I see has joined us. And I've also then, when I came to Los Angeles, well, also in Nevada County, where I moved from Berkeley, we had a theater company, and that's where I got to create, with a wonderful troupe of people, work out my ideas about ritual drama in the contemporary moment, and did a cycle of plays called Seed to Snow, Plays for the Seasons, that were performed outdoors in the various times of day, and specific locations to the seasons, and we developed them using improvisation and so forth. It was everything I wanted to explore, and hope to publish those. But anyway, I moved to the Bay Area and got involved in environmental work, and that is sort of at the core of what I care about always, and did a couple of productions. One was Earth, Water, Air Los Angeles, which was a giant puppet trek across Los Angeles. Yay, Phoebe was involved in that, and her students, for 4 days. We did it for about various iterations for about 5, 6, 7 years. Giant puppets, headdresses, music. We marched across Los Angeles performing and having teach-ins. The big one, we did it for 4 days and camped. Camped in Griffith Park. It was wild. Marched down the streets. It was great. And then at the same time, I helped found a group, a street theater group called Frogworks. And this was specifically having to do with saving the Bayona wetlands. And we performed in New York. We performed on Wall Street. We performed all over LA. We just pop up and performed, or we were invited. And we did that for almost 10 years, and various scripts. And we used puppets and all the street, the mime troupe was, of course, a great inspiration for all of that. And so I wrote about both of those things. I published an essay in a book on activist theater on Frogworks, and I published an essay, a chapter about Earth, Water, Air Los Angeles, the giant puppet trek, in a collection of essays about Los Angeles. It's published by Sage Publications.
That's great. I was thinking about, the origin. I remember reading a long time ago that, and I'm no linguist, but you being an archaeologist and an anthropologist and a very well-educated woman, I read someplace where the word for origin, actually radical is in there too. So to get back to the origin, it almost takes a radical movement to get back to that origin. And, you know, things get so covered up by artifacts and culture ways, et cetera. But you've been doing a wonderful job. And I always, I just am tremendously moved by your sense of unity and also your spiritual connection. You know, the Dalai Lama, you know, he once said that, you know, we are all connected and we all go back to that same, we're all connected to that same creator, whatever word you want to use for that, you know, creation myth. And God bless all of these, and it makes us all realize that the work that you have done. Just one other question I wanted to ask, if you could kind of deal with it in a couple of minutes, is one thing when people are young, you mentioned you wrote when you were young, elementary school, the kids seem to have a sense of wonder. And a friend of ours used to teach in magnet schools, and every year he would teach us, send us an anthology, you know, from 3rd, 4th grade up to high school. And I noticed that in grade school, the kids really had a sense of wonderment. And then once they would hit about junior high, they would start getting more analytical and more prose-like, and on and on. I mean, I don't want to follow that down the road, but you know where I'm going. How do you keep, you as a poet and you as a, you know, teaching us about these origins, how do you keep in your poetry the spareness and the precision and the poetic aspect of it? That's my question. Is that too complicated? I mean,
that's a big question, Harry. Oh my God.
Let's just talk about how do you write poetry then, even though you've been so well educated?
You know, it's wild. It's the wild spirit of the world that keeps me knocked open. I've always been, I think as a child, I found salvation in nature, given the kind of complicated situation of my home life. And going out in the desert, my first one-woman show is called Origins of Praise. It's a poem, but I performed it. And it was my discovery of this wonder really was in that desert, being confronted on my pony out there where it was wild, confronted by the crows and terrified of them. And they got me. I'm afraid, Harry, they got me.
Well, you gave a fabulous reading, and we hope someday you'll come back and share more of your wonderful writing with it. It was really inspiring, and it unified us all once again. And that's what Jennifer Clymer has been doing with her 3 to 5 days of these live shows. So thank you once again, Susan, and over to you, Jennifer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us.